in the room, considering this is about Open API and no code API integrations with Open API. Does this just click?
Yeah, that should be on to be able to click through. Use the mouse to just click on the presentation window.
Oh, okay. I got you.
We'll actually be able to click through.
Try again. There you go.
Now you
There you go. Yeah, so today we're going to talk a little bit about a new module that we're going to release and talk a little bit more about the API schema, mapping API, some of the challenges we see with mapping API to Drupal, talk a little bit about schema.org, deriving from ECA feeds, plugins, and a couple other examples. We're going to use Vimeo as an example of an API, and Brian will show a little bit of some other stuff that we were able to do with this. So what is Open API? Open API is a standard for RESTful API in a machine-readable format, so like the YAML JSON format. It's really defining endpoints and for requests and responses. And structure, it allows us for like a little more automated testing and can make APIs a little bit more interpretable by other systems. So where did it really come from? A lot of us have heard about Swagger. That was created back in 2011. It wasn't until 2015 that it was donated to the Linux Foundation. And at that point, Open API Initiative came out, and now it's supported by some of the bigger companies and becoming the standard for most open source APIs. Brian, what is one? Yeah.
Okay. So one of the challenges that we've seen in integrating APIs in Drupal is that each integration is one-off and custom. So you have like a Salesforce module or a GitLab module, and each API has its own custom integration, often custom code.
Schema.
And what we're doing is integrating every API based on the Open API specification. And that allows us to take an Open API specification, of which one exists for basically like everything on the internet, like Google, Microsoft, Azure. There's thousands of available Open API schemas, and we can take those and import them into Drupal as an integration, as a two-way integration that syncs them into Drupal entities, and then also allows us, based on the endpoints in the API, to trigger actions through ECA, if you're familiar with it. So it's basically one solution for all API integrations that's instant, consistent, tons of benefit, and we'll see.
Yeah. What's the next one? So introducing the API normalization. So API normalization module is going to provide a robust framework for standardization and validating API responses across Drupal services, ensuring data format, schema validation, and performance optimization for Drupal-based APIs. Oops, next there. So the new model is going to be released probably within the next month. It's going to be standardizing integrations based on the Open API configuration. This actually isn't our latest slide. We had a newer slide that was supposed to show up. Anyways, but yeah, we're excited to release this new module, and it's going to have native integration in with ECA and entity types, external entity types. Zebra.
Okay. So this is what an Open API schema looks like. It's really simple. There's a list of paths, and those paths reference schemas. And those schemas have properties. It should be really familiar to people who worked with Drupal. Like, it should look really similar. Just those are your schemas at the bottom. In that case, it's a GitLab project, and the list of properties, it's only showing 2, but there's like 50 properties. And that's the schema that we take and we map to Drupal fields automatically, and then relate those bundles and fields to the endpoints in the paths. Yeah.
We'll be showing a demo. You can do this one too.
Okay. So what the process is going to look like, we're going to show a list of all the Open API specs, or like 10,000 of them that are available. We're going to take one example and paste it into our module, and go through a workflow that takes those schemas, generates bundles in Drupal, generates fields based on the properties, generates feed types to sync them into Drupal based on the mapping. It's a very, very complete integration, two-way, that syncs them into Drupal as entities and then derives actions that you can use to push into the API.
So we're gonna use Vimeo as an example in our example, but but also on the same subject, it's schema.org. The schema.org module has become really popular, and schema in general is an organized way of mapping information, and so we're gonna also be looking at the schema.org type and developing or of a translation or an integration in with schema.org to let the API have different types. And then it's like a use case right here is determining what schema.org types relate to the Open API schema, mapping them, and then determining what those endpoints are.
And so to start, we're using the schema.org module because it's the best UX for configuring data types and fields that exist in Drupal. And it's written currently just to integrate schema.org types and properties. Schema.org is a library of those types of things and their properties, but specific types of things, like person, organization. Currently, we're just mapping everything to a thing in schema.org with custom properties, but using AI, that'll be the next step of actually telling us contextually what these things are. So a GitLab project is actually a software application, and schema.org has types and properties that
Map to that.
Yeah, so to start, what we're going to do today is just map it to a thing. But using AI, we'll be able to actually understand contextually what it is as the next step. We should have gone to the demo before.
Okay.
Why don't we show...
Yeah, show the demo.
Yeah, because...
Get a little more context.
Yeah. There we go. I drag this over. Okay.
Start at the beginning. Yeah.
Open API directory. So this is a directory of Open API schemas for every service that I've ever used. And we're going to take one of those examples. Vimeo is a basic example. And this is the complete schema. And I'm going to copy that into our module. Vimeo. I'm going to tell it derive bundles, entity types of Vimeo. Currently, we're just doing local storage, which syncs them into Drupal using feeds. Once we have a need to, we'll also support external entities that does not store them in Drupal, which is ideal for big data sets. But the data sets we're working with are in the order of thousands, and it just makes sense to hold them in the Drupal, because then you can use views and Experience Builder and treat them like they're actual entities. All right. First step, I save it. The next step of the workflow, it's going to tell me all the schemas that it parsed in there and all the paths. And then we're going to pick schemas that we want to sync into Drupal.
And everything always runs slower when you're screen sharing. Are you going to rebuild them or just show them?
Yeah, I'm going to, as we were coming over here, I saved it over there so that we don't have to wait while we're here. But these were built while we were prepping earlier. All right, so I found 179 paths and 37 entity types. Pick the entity types. And then I'm just going to redo one so it doesn't take an hour. It's much faster on like the current version over there. But so when that form is finished saving, it generates the bundles, their fields,
Are these node bundles or some custom entity?
custom entity type. But you can, it's set up to map to existing entity types, or you can create new ones. So the data model is up to you. These are all the feeds from the other entity types that we've been doing. Vimeo. So one example bundle, these are the fields that it saved, and then it stores what the source property was in the schema in the API. And based on that, generates a mapping in feeds to sync them all in. So that's one simple use case, is just Vimeo, but we're doing, basically you can take anything in this directory and have an instant integration, which I think is really good.
Yeah, what really makes this powerful is that once they're into entities, you're able to use ECK to orchestrate workflows. Like an example is what we're doing with probably show GitLab.
Yeah. So it's two-way integrations. We sync them into Drupal, and then we're using ECA to do automation based on those endpoints.
So at this point, GitLab's whole API is built into entities within Drupal and accessible by ECA, and allowing you to fire off any API command from a Drupal interface.
So this ECA, it's a combination of GitLab and Kubernetes APIs that creates projects on GitLab. Organizations. So that ECA is building and deploying Drupal and GitLab instances using no code. So we started with a really simple use case like Vimeo, but you can do anything with it. Like Kubernetes and GitLab, IoT entities, like anything, which is really cool. But yeah, what we saw was just Vimeo generated. Oh, and this is what schema.org looks like. The way we're pulling them into Drupal is we're using schema.org because they have a whole like set of screens UX for configuring data types and mappings. This one, yeah. This one's not complete, but it works on the latest version. It generates these mappings that you can then configure, and you don't have, we basically recommend these mappings, and then you can override them on this screen by changing the fields. Schema.org. And schema.org has, it's huge. Schema.org is really, really cool.
And again, the goal here was building a no-code solution to API integration.
Yeah, I don't want to derail too much. But
Yeah.
Schema.org is, yeah, has UX for configuring data types. And there will be additional value to having contextual understanding what these things are, but we're still figuring that out. Okay.
Back to the presentation.
Yeah. What? Oh, it's right there. Okay.
So you can do this one.
Okay.
Kind of stuck with this spot.
Yeah, this is what we just showed. We pull them into Drupal bundles and fields, and we store third-party configuration on those fields and bundles, and then based on that, this is probably going to be a separate module, because we want to be able to derive things not just from the APIs, but like So this will probably move to a separate module, but currently,
A submodule.
or submodule, it stores, it generates the bundles and fields, stores their data that we pulled out of OpenAPI, and stores them on the bundles and fields, and then derives feed types, external entities, actions, and other things that we're still figuring out.
As an example. Then, did you want to speak about the GitLab stuff, or?
We just showed this.
There you go.
This is the entire system. It's probably too much for a 20-minute conversation, but at the bottom we're showing like all APIs synced into Drupal, and then deriving ECA as a rules engine, feeds, webhooks, and yeah.
And then we have just a quick detail view of that. And open to any questions. I know this is kind of geeky and deep.
I can handle updates.
From the APIs or from new entities?
APIs.
We haven't had that need yet.
Yeah.
You could create a new API spec. We haven't had that need yet. We could work it out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I definitely think of a couple different directions in that.
But also APIs probably don't want to change their schemas so often.
Exactly.
No, I'm not thinking of updating the schema, but updating
Getting
the
information.
data you get from the API. Does every entity have a UUID or something from the API that you can then use to know which Drupal entity to update?
Oh,
Yeah. We're pulling endpoints, so it's not. Go on.
Feeds has configuration for storing or configuring what are the unique fields of that entity. So we are storing that and doing updates already. That's part of feeds. It's configuration. It's on the mapping screen, you pick which fields are unique, and then on the processor screen, you decide like update existing, delete existing, or skip.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other questions?
So you showed that repo earlier where you're grabbing the file, describing the API. Is there some sort of standard route on the OpenAPI spec, which you can get that from, or do you need to get that from an external source, or assume it or write it yourself?
So most vendors publish their OpenAPI specs. Like I Googled the vendor name OpenAPI spec, and that's how I found like everything I've needed to. Some services have discovery endpoints, like Kubernetes entirely runs on OpenAPI, so they have API endpoints that describe their APIs. And I've also pulled them from there, but there hasn't been one service that we use that I haven't been able to find like a public spec for though.
But there are a couple big repositories, so I could see building in some discovery around that to those repositories into this module to allow some more, auto finding of those right schemas.
Oh, and also you showed that thing on GitLab that like generates OpenAPI schemas. Yeah.
There's definitely some more tools out there. GitLab has also a service for generating open API schemas, but it's a premium or ultimate feature, so it isn't in their GitLab core, the open source.
That's for like custom. That's for like discovering. It analyzes your custom APIs and generates a spec. But all the vendors that we've used, like all like 20 or 30 that I've checked, I've found just on Google.
Existing ones. The whole goal is to have a low-code, easy way to get integration.
When this launches next month, is it going to be covered under the Drupal security advisory?
It won't be at first. It has to go through the process. That's a Moshe question.
No, it's also we're trying to figure out how to package it
before you upload a module for it to go through automated testing.
I think people go through a process, but
As I thought.
your project can opt in immediately.
You opt in immediately, and then people.
As long as what you maintain has a role.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it has a role. Okay.
We're also wondering how to package it because the configuration that gets generated can be exported and have no dependencies on our module. So we might have like recipes for each of these integrations that you can just install. Especially if we start using AI and like OpenAI, we don't want to have any kind of licensing constraints. So we'll probably publish recipes for each integration that just has the configuration and no licensing or dependencies on our module.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before we wrap it up?
I guess one of my many neglected modules is the Akamai module.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do you think there's any like place for integrating with Akamai in that?
We already did
ecosystem?
Cloudflare.
Yeah, we did Cloudflare.
Yeah. So we can create domains and do everything from Drupal in Cloudflare. So we don't have to go to Cloudflare.
This is the process.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
right now the Akamai module is just like a purge plugin.
Yeah, you got it.
OpenAI, oh, look at that.
Yeah, so yes, we can.
Yeah, I just wonder if the users of the Akamai module will want to install a lot of this stuff, or if
Well,
there's some piece
only
of it.
one person would have to do this and then export it.
Yeah. All it is, you could install the module, do this once, and uninstall the module.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no
Oh,
dependency on the module once it creates the entities. And if the Akamai is not going to update their API endpoints, which most likely they don't, until they do, if they were like in REST and they're going to switch to GraphQL with some kind of major update like that. But other than that, you wouldn't normally have that.
So I'm going to just, this is what only one person needs to do to generate all the configuration and then export it. So on this screen, it's going to show me all the schemas and the paths, hopefully, but live demo. 8 paths. Yeah, but there was like 50 files in that repo, and I'm sure we could find the right one.
Which it was.
I see. So then the Akamai module becomes a recipe with some entity information, some ECA configuration, and the sites can just adjust it if they want to call it different.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, again, you're then using Drupal as the control panel for all your services. You're using ECA as the orchestrator and workflow orchestrator. And then that connects to whatever, GitLab or Cloudflare and control the services.
This might be getting a little too techy, but I think one of the biggest things is the fact that it's a two-way sync that I have not seen anywhere, like N8N or Zapier, like these automation tools that you use. They have no understanding, like you don't get any of these in it, but we're actually syncing them into, so like you can then build views and put them in displays and two-way syncs. Like we're also supporting, like we do feeds polls, and we also wrote something that allows webhooks to push into our feeds so that we can do push syncs, if that makes sense. But that gives you like a GitLab pipeline runs, and there's 5 build phases. Then we get instant like notifications that we can then trigger events on that do more things than ECA.
It's just, it really does extend the whole ECA kind of API in Drupal to a whole another level. And so the whole, the reason why we haven't launched it yet is that we're trying to figure out how, what to put into submodules and how to divide up the functionality in it to be as simple as possible when you install it and then be able to add functionality. Any other questions before we wrap it up? Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Awesome.